Glad there's somebody else driving this ship, Jax. Jeez. All right. Oh, so let's roll. So I think we're recording. Is that what I said? Yeah, it's recording. Okay. Great. All right. And I'm gonna totally blow your intro, I know, but I'm gonna give it a try. So um what does it mean to be called crazy in a crazy world? Listen to Madness Radio, Voices and Visions from Outside Mental Health, an affiliate of McNamara Radio, broadcasting on KBOO in Oregon, sponsored by Portland Hearing Voices and the Icarus Project, and syndicated on the Pacifica Network. Madness Radio is online at kboo.fm/madnessradio and at madinamerica.com. Welcome to Madness Radio. This is your host, Will Hall, and I'm joined by co-host Jax McNamara. Hello there, Jax.
Hey, good to see you, Will.
Yeah, great to see you. Today, our guest is Laura Marie River Victor Peace Nopales. Laura Marie is a queer traveler, maker of zines, radical mental healther, fat liberation, queer liberation, and autistic liberationer, and the creator of Disabled Resilience Permaculture. So welcome to Madness Radio, Laura Marie.
Thank you.
We're so glad you're here. It's really good to see you and have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you on the show. I'm sorry there was a delay in getting you here, and here we are. I think my head is screwed back on sufficiently enough to do this. So we'll find out. So how should we get started?
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what led you to all those exciting things in your bio that Will Hall just read about?
Yeah.
Like, how did you get to a place of thinking about fat liberation and autistic liberation and disability justice? And yeah, what's the twisting path?
Yeah.
Thanks for asking. I think when it comes to fat liberation, I hated myself as a child. I hated myself. I thought everything about me was wrong. But there was this little squeaky voice deep inside that said, actually, maybe you're okay, Laura Marie. It was like a mouse, but not as furry, maybe. And so even though I had all this self-hate, there was this little part of me that knew somehow that I was actually a valid person and okay. And that maybe there was nothing really wrong with me, even though I believed that I had everything wrong with me. So once I became an adult, I hid out for a long time. I was at this ashram and I was doing the singing, and I worked in the bookstore, and I mostly just didn't really talk to people for about 10 years. And then I went on a bipolar cocktail that was very sedating. And I used to think of that as the last decade or the last years, that time. But I think I was resting. I think I really needed some rest after what I had endured as a child and as a young adult. So at that ashram.
So a bipolar cocktail, you mean like medications, psych medication?
Yeah. Yeah, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 with psychotic features and put on these 3 medications that I slept like 11 hours a night and didn't have much energy. But I had been told I was a danger to myself and others, and I believed it. So then I took this medicine for a long time. I took that medicine for about 12 years. Mm-hmm. So the last years, which now I realize were not lost at all. I just needed to sing a lot, and I needed to meditate and hang out with people doing something different from what my culture told me to do for a while. And I had these amazing dreams. I remember some of them. They were the best dreams of my life. At night when I was sleeping, I had these dreams. Well, then finally,
I'm dying to ask you to tell us one of the dreams. I'm sorry, I had to interrupt you. Can you tell us just one? Do you remember them?
Well, by interplanetary time traveling post-apocalyptic librarian dream is my favorite, where I was searching in this forest for a manuscript. And finally I found it. It was in this box and it was buried, partly buried under some leaves and dirt. And I had to take the manuscript to this building. So I was walking toward town, but everyone else was walking away from town. So I was headed toward this big, beautiful building, and then the ash started falling. I think the nuclear bomb had just gone off and this planet was going to be destroyed. And there was a little child who was crying and walking, and I picked up the child and held the child, and I was walking up the stairs with my manuscript and this little kid. And then I got to this room where the other interplanetary time traveling librarians were waiting for me to arrive with the manuscript. And they were all sitting at this oval table, and we all held hands, and then we all disappeared because I had found the manuscript, and it was, we had to get out, like the planet was done pretty much. But I had what I needed. And so that, to me, like that dream feels really, there's other parts of the dream, but the way the scientists were taking their clothes off, and the ash that was falling. At the time, I didn't know that my ancestors had been bombed in the Trinity bomb test in New Mexico. It was about only a few years ago that I learned my ancestors had endured that when I was visiting Carzozo and went to this little museum and saw a little graphic of as the crow flies, how far Carzozo was from ground zero of that Trinity test in 1945, which my Nana, my mom's mom, died of a lymphoma cancer when she was 52, which I think was related to that bomb test. And that's associated with a lot of family trauma. But that dream showed to me, in that dream, I wasn't my regular self. I was some dream version of myself, but it showed to me some deeper purpose and some beautiful goals of helping culture in a way that was very meaningful and important. And even though that wasn't my regular life, that was my dream life, I still felt very connected to those feelings and that need of saving precious, beautiful parts of culture, even as culture is destroying itself. And I still feel like that now.
What an incredible dream.
Seriously.
That's amazing. And the levels upon levels of like metaphor and meaning in that dream.
Right.
Wow.
And that's something I probably wouldn't have had if I was working 9 to 5 and watching TV. It was something that, meditating and singing in Sanskrit and the things I was doing, facilitated. So I'm really glad that I had those last years because I was healing. And I feel like I've healed in so many ways, and that was a very important way. And I'm so grateful that I had what I had at that ashram, and I had a good friend by my side who took me under her wing, and nobody abused me there. I'm so grateful.
So what happened then? You said you had these lost years, and then something changed, or you left the ashram, or what happened next?
Oh, yeah, I had been resting a lot, and then I was very restless after a while and needed to get out. And I met somebody who was very exciting to me, who invited me to an event called the Sacred Peace Walk. And I went with this person who became my spouse, who took me to the Sacred Peace Walk. And it was 6 days walking through the desert from Las Vegas, Sin City, the seat of so much debauchery and pain, to the Nevada test site, which is one of the most bombed places on earth. So we walked for 6 days, and I discovered that community is possible. I had never really seen a functional, happy community like that. So once I saw that community was possible, I needed to do community. So I changed my life a lot. I left the partner I had been living with in a very sad, moldy apartment and became homeless for a little while, and was in love with my spouse, Ming, and it was a whole different mentality I had once I was more free and once I could be around people a little more. I became less scared of people. That's one of the big changes. That's a good question of what changed. But then Ming and I ended up moving to Las Vegas and helped run the anti-nuclear interfaith nonprofit Nevada Desert Experience. And we were there for 7 years. So that's where I learned even more about community, because I lived for 7 years as a Catholic worker, although I am not Catholic or Christian. So I was doing works of mercy within the Catholic worker tradition, which is religious anarchists. And we were feeding hungry people, making gardens, and caring for the disabled elders who we lived with. And I was, I write and make zines. So I was doing a lot of art and learning new ways to be around people, and coming out of those lost years towards something more vibrant and creative with a much bigger world, which had different risks and different things to learn. So I'm in that bigger world still and learning a lot still. And I'm homeless again.
What happened? These questions may dovetail. What happened to the years on the bipolar cocktail of medication? And then where did that intersect or not intersect with the Las Vegas Radical Mental Health Collective?
Those years on the bipolar cocktail overlapped with the years that I was at the ashram. And then when I found community and moved to Las Vegas. And then once I had been in Las Vegas for a few years, there was an artist who heard about act of violence in Las Vegas that had to do with the police, content warning, violence, of police violence and racism. The police person killed a young Black person who was scared and was running and had come to the police person to ask for help. So this incident sparked a lot of feelings in a lot of people about what happens in Las Vegas with race, class, mental health, police violence, and violence. An artist in Los Angeles heard about it and wanted to support de-escalation in Las Vegas. So he donated some money that helped us form the Las Vegas Street Medics, which my spouse ran for 5 years, and the Las Vegas Radical Mental Health Collective, which I helped start 5.5 years ago and still help run today. So I'm not sure exactly the relationship between the Las Vegas Radical Mental Health Collective and the experimentation of getting off of those psych meds, which has gone so well. But probably it was kind of funny that I was helping to run a Las Vegas Radical Mental Health Collective while very sedated on psych meds. And it kind of makes sense that I would want to try to figure out who I would be without those medications. So there was definitely some kind of relationship. But I had first encountered radical mental health 16 years ago when I was first diagnosed. So that's when I was 30. That's when I had my first manic episode and found the Icarus Project online.
So that it sounds like that was a big transition moment, because you were in this ashram And then in the peace movement, it sounds like you discovered community. So I'm interested because when I hear someone lives in an ashram, I tend to think, oh, ashrams have community figured out, or what was it that was new, or what was it that was really showing you like what community really is? What was going on with you and the people that you were doing this peace activism with that really showed you, wow, this is really community, not what was in the ashram?
The ashram was very hierarchical, top down. You knew who were the bosses for reals. And it was designed that way. It was explicit. And some things with gender there were reprehensible to me, to the point of anguish and, oh no, I have to leave. Oh, but this is where I'm safe. I have to stay. Pain. So I'm glad I was safe there and that I could sing and I could learn and meditate and be among people who were a lot older than me, mostly, and learn about Advaita, learn about non-dualism, and sing in Bengali and interact with some amazing people. I'm so grateful for what I had there. But when I came on the Sacred Peace Walk, it was a different type of freedom and vibrancy. It wasn't the hierarchical scene of the ashram. There were so many different kinds of people. And I remember my first day of the Sacred Peace Walk, that's the city walk where we would walk on the strip. So I was with this group of people I just met who are mostly some kinds of hippies. And then also, there were some Native American indigenous people there who had sung and prayed for us when we stepped off. And there were some Buddhists there. And there were other people of other faiths, some who I never really spent time with before. But when we were walking on the strip and the casino sounds, these lights are flashing and the sounds are coming out to entice passersby. And it was sensory overload for me. But the thing that really broke my heart was the postcards. There were these advertisement postcards all over the ground that had pictures of mostly naked women. So I saw these postcards of these beautiful sacred beings represented, trampled underfoot like trash. And I started crying and had a hard time stopping because I felt like so much of what had harmed me about my culture was being distilled into a mess, the mess that is Las Vegas, especially the strip. So I was crying and crying, and no one really understood why I was crying. But that was an intense day for me. And that night there was an interfaith minister who was young and so vibrant and so kind. And she saw that I was hurting. So she said, "Oh, do you want to come to my room and I'll pray with you?" And I was like, "Okay." I didn't know anyone there except the person I'd come with, who I also barely knew at the time. So I went with her into her room, and she had this little pouch where she had some stones, kind of like the stone I'm holding in my hand right now for comfort. And she had maybe a candle. She had something that made smoke that smelled good. I think it was Palo Santo or some kind of herbs that she burned. She prayed with me, and I felt a lot better. I felt loved, and I had never felt loved like that by someone who I just met the day before. And people would tell me, some people, naysayers, would tell me, love isn't like that. Love takes a long time. Love is slow, and it's kind of dysfunctional or bad boundaries to love really quickly. But I found in that community, that person is still my friend, and it's been almost 11 years. That love was real that day, and the love is real today. So that helped me see, like, community doesn't have to be a bunch of messed up people who come together out of necessity to hurt each other with kind of a thinly veiled a thinly veiled like semblance of civility. It can be like actual authentic connection of people who do love each other skillfully. And uh, so that made all the difference. And I had not believed in it. I had not believed it was possible. But part of it was this experience I'm telling you with the prayer, you know, the medicine bag and prayer. But the whole week was filled with what felt like miracles like that. So once I could see that was real, I had no choice. I had to go toward it. So yeah, that's when I left my ex-husband and I made a new life. And it was risky and scary, and my mom didn't approve, but that's what I chose to do, and that's what I did, and I'm so glad.
Mm, that's a really beautiful story.
Thanks.
Mm,
Yeah, it's making me think of when I was a teenager and I came out to California for the first time. And I got involved with anarchist peace, anti-nuclear groups. And there was that quality, and you're helping me to really name it. It was kind of probably the first time I had felt that sense of community and love. I think I had it as a kid in theater when I was acting and doing musical theater and stuff. But there was that huge hunger that was there and had kind of been forgotten or neglected. And then because there were these incredible, ecstatic, joyful solidarity, connection. We're all in this together, and real magic to so much of that activism. And as a 17-year-old, just really, really swept me right into it. So you're bringing back some of those experiences I've had as well.
Yeah, that little mini culture that we created within the shell of the larger culture was so exciting and so beautiful. I remember I could be around people who weren't, you know, we weren't about buying things. We weren't about a conventional performance of success. We were about walking by the side of the road in the desert and praying together and singing. And to me that was joy. That was the best thing in the world. And I think about the fourth day we walked into a gas station for popsicles. There was this gas station kind of by the Air Force Base. And to be in a store was so disorienting. It felt like culture shock, like, it's a store. What do we do here? Oh, we buy things with money. It just felt like so strange. And I loved how it felt so strange. And to eat our popsicles as we walked away, and just to know I am not trapped in a world that is only for money. Like, I can, this community of something else being at
Mm,
the center exists, and I can visit it, and I can go back, and I can make more of this culture. I was so happy. And I was so sad when I had to leave and go home. I remember the last little part of that week we spent together, and how heartbroken I was that I had to leave. But I knew that I could have more and make more, and I have. So grateful for that.
yeah, it makes me think of my early experiences with Icarus Project groups, like local local groups, and there was
yeah,
such
yeah.
a sense of love and creating culture and being able to show up as we were. And I don't remember the exact language you used around like performing success or something like that. But that it was a place that was really not about performing success. And that was really like, we love each other, warts and all. And I really miss that. I miss that quite a lot. How did any of these experiences lead to your growing in terms of self-love?
I think learning to respect and love myself was probably inevitable once I learned how to respect and love. Well, once I saw that the people who are difficult to me deserve respect, And in addition to the people who I liked deserved respect, and people who had different kinds of disabilities deserved respect. Eventually that beam of love got to shine on me. Eventually it was my turn. It took a while, but I think being in community, even that temporary first community on the Sacred Peace Walk, helped me see the respect that we could give to anyone. Because on that last day, when we got to the line of the test site and our friend prayed us and drummed us to that line, and we stood there and we heard our friend speak truth to power of the officer from the test site who would stand there and listen. There was this like ritual that we did there, ritual in the sense of we did it pretty similar every year, I think, where the guards would be ready for us in their little hut and in their uniforms and with their walkie-talkies and sometimes with a trained German Shepherd. And they had vehicles and they had the line that separates into the test site. And we would pray and then we would drum and walk up to the line and then we would face them and they would face us. And then our friend would speak truth to that power and we would hear him. And then some of us would cross the line and we're arrested at that place in a ritualistic way. And when we encountered those workers, we understood that we weren't there to tell them that they were bad or wrong or that we hated them. We encountered the workers to send a message of love and another option, another way. And to me, like if I can love the test site worker who helps create and test 1,000 nuclear bombs or contributes, toward others creating and testing all those nuclear bombs. If I can love that person, man, I could love anybody really, because creating that type of megadeath of harm is reprehensible to me. But if I can respect that person and respect the mystery inside of them, that I don't, I can see here's a white looking, dude looking person in this uniform playing this role. But inside of that person, I don't know who they are. I don't know anything of that mystery, the sacredness inside of them. So once I realized I'm not there to tell anyone they're wrong, but to build bridges and to show another way of being, that type of respect can reverberate out. And that's what I was trying to do there at the line at the test site, but that's what I'm trying to do in a Radical Mental Health Collective or in the zines that I write, or when I'm dancing outside as a fat woman, not ashamed of my body, or riding adult trike and waving to the neighbors as we pass by. I feel that I'm modeling at all times that I'm a valid person, and I pray that when they see me as a valid person, they can learn to see themselves as a valid person too. So that deep truth that I want to speak and share and perform and support others in finding is all bodies are valid bodies. And that means crazy people such as myself, fat people, disabled people, queer, all the people, every person of all the ages and all the genders and all the jobs. And so that respect is very important to me. And I'm so glad that respect doesn't stay still. It gets on other things and gets on other people. I'm so grateful that it has splashed.
That's a great way to think of it. I love that.
I love what you said about, seeing the person, and there's the role that they're in, but underneath it, there's this sacredness and this mystery that we all have. And I just so resonate with that. That's a deeply held feeling and belief that I have. Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of my friends, they don't see it like that. They like to fantasize about punching Nazis, or they fantasize about deeply harming others who have hurt and offended them. And I can't, I love my friend, but I can't help but think of how, I think a MLK quote like about how fire can't put out fire, like hate can't put out hate, only love can do that.
You mentioned the Catholic worker movement, which anarchist and Catholic, and also pacifist and into nonviolence. Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned so much from spending a lot of time with Catholic workers, and the people who have left the Catholic worker are some of my closest friends, and different ways of trying to do justice and trying to do community. It's really hard. And then if you're in an org that has been around since 1933, so much needs to change. And then some people are digging in their heels, and some people want to learn more about different kinds of justice and ways of being. So it there's the benefit of having the name recognition and longevity of being with an org that old, but then some people don't want to change how they're seeing certain things about people and humanity, and they don't want to give up their power. They don't want to share. They want to hold on as much power as they can, if they have a lot of it with their dominance. And so yeah, it's been really interesting to learn about community as a Catholic worker, and to be a non-Catholic Catholic worker, a non-straight Catholic worker, a disabled Catholic worker. Being disabled in community has taught me so much about power and justice, and the things that people want to hold on to, and the things that are so rarely said, but that affect so many of us every day of our lives. So I'm grateful that I spent those 7 years as a Catholic worker, and that I made some really wonderful food for people and grew some beautiful gardens. But I'm glad to be trying other kinds of community now.
I'm curious, what are some of those unsaid things that being disabled in community has made you aware of?
My spouse and I were staying at a permaculture farm in Ojai, California. And I remember arriving and feeling so happy to say, I'm among hippies, I can relax here. I was so comforted by the huge loquat trees and the gorgeous walnut trees. So happy to see all those beautiful chickens. And I learned that chickens are my animal, because I didn't really get along with the dogs and the cats as much, and I learned chickens are where my heart is. But I remember one of those first days, it was really hot, and I was walking around with wearing a tank top, and I like to tuck my tank top under my breasts, because that way there's cloth there and it feels more comfortable to me. But sometimes my large tummy sticks out. And I thought, oh, this is where I'm going to be living. These people can handle a tummy. I'm pretty sure they can handle that. I respect these people and I believe in them. They can handle this. But one of the people who I lived in community with there for that short time would look down at my tummy in a way that was disapproving. And I was like, oh, she doesn't like my tummy. That's too bad. Because I like my tummy, and I'm not gonna hate it for any reason. But I thought, I gave a lot of credit to those people in the sense of they can handle my fatness. They can handle the truth about my disability when I walk down the stairs sideways. They're not going to think I'm lesser than for that. Or when we're open about my spouse's narcolepsy, they're not going to think lesser of us for that. They'll see our value because my spouse is helping them fix their bikes. And my spouse sets these traps for the rats that are in the kitchen. And we tend those chickens every morning and every evening without fail. And we give them fresh water. And my spouse mucked out the chicken coop, which no one had done for a long time. I really trusted them to see our value and to see our good hearts and that our love energy would shine and everyone would notice that and value that. But the truth is, I was the only fat person in that community. There were about 20 people and everybody there was thin and able to looking. And when it came down to it, I don't know if it was my fat tummy sticking out or my spouse's narcolepsy, like those ID bracelets that you wear. So if you pass out, they think they kind of have a clue what's going on. I don't know which of those things it was that made them say no when we asked to be part of that community, but it really hurt that we had trusted them to see our goodness and helpfulness and kindness and how we would be an asset to their community. But they didn't see the value of us despite all the clarity that we tried to give, including of what we wanted to do, lists of our skills, warm good mornings, and the food that we cooked that was pretty tasty. So I think that's a really good example because then I'm in a difficult position when I go on to the next community, right? Like, do I let them see my tummy or do I wear clothing to make myself try to look thinner or whatever I think they want? It requires me to mind read what would be preferred by them and then somehow perform it and hope that I have performed it successfully enough to get the Scooby snack of a place in their community, which is ridiculous because if I'm going to live there, I want to be able to be who I am. And I think the standard way of doing that is kind of the way most people date, which would be like put the best foot forward for 3 months until someone's hooked and they're having sex and the oxytocin is flowing and then slowly leak out who you really are, which I find so reprehensible and so painful, that deceit that destroys consent. So I feel like that was what was expected of me. Oh, they're going to show up their best foot forward, and then we'll find out 3 months from now who they really are. But if we show up as we really are on day one, and they don't believe it, right? Like they think that this is our act, and that it will fall apart later when this is our real, and we're giving them this gift of our realness, but they can't really. That's not what they want. I don't know. What did they really want? They wanted more people like them, I guess. But when we the night before we left, they had a meeting that we weren't invited to, and my spouse was doing laundry and walked by where the meeting was and heard them yelling, full on, whole body yelling at each other. And he was like, "Oh, this is maybe not the community for us." Because it wasn't like a happy, we're finally telling the truth yelling. It was like a deep, seething, resentful, years of hating each other yelling. And it was like, whatever they want, and we're not for them, but they're not for us. But I still love those trees, and I hold them in my heart. And the beautiful, beautiful showers someone made probably 50 years ago that had these gorgeous tiles of fish. It was so big and airy. I loved that shower, but it gave me new things to dream of. Their outdoor kitchen was so gorgeous too. I want to make a whole zine just of my dreams of outdoor kitchens.
That sounds great.
I have a question about your zine making and blogging world. Actually, first I just want to ask, can you tell us more about the name of your blog, Listening to the Noise Until It Makes Sense? I think it's such a great turn of phrase. And, I ascribe my meanings to it when I hear it, but I'd love to know how and why you chose that.
Thank you for asking. I feel like listening to the noise until it makes sense pertains to language acquisition. I imagine myself as a baby and hearing that blah 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 of my relatives. And then I'm hearing this noise, and slowly it kind of like comes into focus, this noise. And then the noise is sense, and there's love attached to it. But it also makes me think of hearing voices. And I think there are a lot of different kinds of voices. And I hear different kinds of voices. And one of them is kind of voices in white noise. And to me, that's listening to noise until my brain kind of like turns the noise into a different kind of sense than like the sound of a fan, and then slowly to hear the voices in the fan, or to see the world and to see faces where there aren't faces for other people, or to see patterns that others don't see. Or when I'm not feeling well, and I start ascribing meaning to things that others don't ascribe meaning to, and seeing sense others don't share. And that can be painful and confusing, and I can associate it with intense fear. But that pattern seeing and sense finding, sense making is also an intelligence. And I think it's an intelligence that the world really needs. I think more business as usual is not what parent Earth needs. Like, I think we need way better than that. So I feel like that creativity of making sense, finding sense, sharing sense it's about truth and what's valuable to me. That's very, very valuable. So yeah, that's what I was trying to do with the name of that blog. And I'm so glad that I chose it, even though it's really long. Probably hard to type the first time, but then once you got it, it'll autofill.
I really like the idea of listening as an expression of love. It's how we put love into actions, through listening.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that one of the things we do in radical mental health the best is listen. I hope we do. Because I feel like sometimes when someone comes and they're new to one of those meetings, and they're being listened to caringly by some mostly strangers, for our in this particular group, the Las Vegas Radical Mental Health Collective, the first check-in that's kind of icebreakery, with name, pronouns, location, real or pretend, and some silly thing like, what's your favorite Lego shape? But then we have the real check-ins, which are longer, the second check-ins. And usually, depending on how many people come, someone's keeping time and someone can talk for 5 minutes straight. And for so long, that was the only space in my life that I had where I could talk for 5 minutes straight, no interrupt me. And I had a lot of faith that I wasn't being too much. I wasn't hurting people by talking too much or saying too much. So that very, very valuable listening is so beautiful. And one of my, I make lists of what I like about radical mental health. And to me, this list I wrote right before we started our conversation doesn't have listening on it, but it could have listening on it. Can I share my list with you?
Yeah, definitely.
My list that I wrote just a little earlier. My favorite things about radical mental health include having a lot of options with treatment, medication options, pro-choiceness, keeping our autonomy for as long as we can, as much as we can, over our own bodies, which involves consent. I like having plans in place, kind of plans for if things aren't going well. what are the best options then. I like about radical mental health that there are fewer assumptions. Because I feel like if I go to like a mainstream mental health meeting, there are definitely assumptions like that voices are bad, that extreme states have no good aspect to them, that I want to go back to full-time work as a regular employee, or and I feel like in radical mental health there are people who have there are way more different things we could want. So fewer assumptions about values. And in radical mental health, yeah, I encounter people who define success in new ways. I really like that. I've always liked that. I want to define success in a way that includes me and the people I love. And I'm not going to probably find that success that other people wish for me or wish for themselves, but I'm going to find success in a different way. I like about radical mental health that I can hold a vision of a better way, and I can co-create a vision with people in a meeting who might come for one meeting or who might be someone I love for decades. So holding that better way in our hearts and believing in it together, if only for an hour and a half of a meeting. I like the community aspect of it, the clarity that we make for each other in this really sweet container that's strong but very flexible. I like speaking the truth. The truth, the truth that in regular life a lot of times we don't get to say. That's really wonderful to do together too. That's too rare, but it's so necessary if we want to have a functional culture to be able to tell the truth. I also really like the aspect of the possibility of healing culture. So if we can have some healing for ourselves and then healing in a group, and if that can be some powerful medicine that we share around with everyone in our everyday lives. It just seems wonderful to create a little sweet spot or a little haven for a little while. And then that which we create there, we bring outward. And there are so many ways that we can harm each other in radical mental health, just like in the regular world. But at least we're trying something different. And I also love about it how there can be the intersectionality of so many different types of liberation that we do, that we can bring into radical mental health. And I love like being witnessed by people who I might not even know long term. But when I speak my truth to them, they can be almost like a representative of humanity. Like it doesn't have to necessarily be that specific person. It could be like, this is a person. I can tell this truth that I had previously held as a deep horrible secret to this person, and they can still keep standing there looking at me with a neutral look on their face. Like it doesn't have to be I have broken this huge like cultural rule by saying this scary or big or transgressive thing. So to have that witness of people who I may or may not know is it's so good at what you mentioned before, Jax, about learning to love myself, because all these things that had been previously hidden as horrible and unspeakable become speakable and are spoken, and the world doesn't explode. like we can say these things and we can be okay. So those are probably some of my most favorite things about radical mental health today, but tomorrow they might be different.
That's a great list.
Yeah, it's really touching on all the many, 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 many times being in Freedom Center or Hearing Voices groups or Icarus groups, or just those moments of communion and community and love is in the room and you're all together and there's this human solidarity connection that happens. I mean, those are incredibly magical, precious moments. And I listening to your list, they really, it evokes that in me. It really brings that to me.
Can you you tell us a little bit about your practice as a zine maker?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I've been making zines for 32 years, so since I was a young teenager. And I make them pretty similar to how I always did, with cut and paste and scissors. My main zine, probably right now, is Functionally Ill, which is my mental health zine, which is on issue 32. So I started it 16 years ago when I was first diagnosed with severe chronic mental illness. And it really chronicles my journey from being really afraid and thinking I was bad and messed up and wrong to feeling a lot better about myself and the world, about both my parents' deaths in that zine. I talk about getting on benefits, including Social Security. I talk about being re-diagnosed and on and off medications, sleep, family, work, community, sexuality, autism, many things. And I used to think I was done with Functionally Ill. I'd say, oh, that was my last issue. And I made that cartoon character hand gesture of done, where you like slap your hands together and some like dust flies out. There we go, I'm done. But in truth, I was not done. I would have some other big life issue that I need to talk about with the radical mental health lens and write about and share about. So I usually just send my zines to my friends. I like to do zine trades. I used to go to Zine Fest and like the Portland Zine Symposium. I tabled at once. But mostly those fests are just too long. Like I can't be social for 8 hours a day. It's not possible for me. So I can't do the fests as well. I like to leave my zines in little free libraries and laundromats and bus stops and libraries. But mostly, yeah, I give them to friends, a lot of them through the mail. Or we have like a long-term trades going on. Me and other zinesters trade for a long time. But I see the zine making as another way of speaking truth, using the gifts that my ancestors handed to me. They worked so hard to survive and to hand these gifts to me, so I feel a deep responsibility to use them. And the zines are one of the ways of many. And I'm not sure how many people they reach. If I only make, say 50 of the first run, and then I might make a few more runs if people like them or people want more. But sometimes they share them with friends too, so then that's a few more eyes on it. But then when I compare that to something like a YouTube video, at least I can see then how many views that has, or I can look at my blog at the analytics and see how many people read a certain post. And I think, even though the numbers aren't so big, there's a cumulative effect from that. I think it's meaningful, and I'm happy to try. I have a zine called Trike Diaries that's about riding adult trike in my neighborhood after my mom died, and I asked my spouse to take my picture every day as a spiritual practice of being seen. After a life of avoiding photographs and not wanting to be seen, I wished to be invisible more than anything for most of my life. I have a zine called A Special Treehouse for Fat People that's about fat liberation. I have a poetry zine called Hat Genius. I have a lot of one-offs like To Love, Abusers in Radical Spaces, and Love is a Skill We Can Strengthen. I have a zine called How Not to Domestic Violence Anyone. I have a little Pride zine. I have a new Mad Map zine. I have a lot of one-offs. I have some Resisting Capitalism for Fun. I have called Fish Letters. That's unsent letters mostly, talking to people I can't talk to anymore in regular life. I have a vegan cook zine. I have a gender zine called Sexuality as Hidden. As you can tell, zines are basically, there's a stereotype about people who have autism who get obsessed about things. That's there. that's me. Zines obsession. It's fun. It's pretty innocuous. I mean, it doesn't take that much space to store them. My spouse files my originals, and it's okay. And it's a good way to talk to brilliant, creative people who, like me, define success in different ways, because zines are inherently more small scale, and we're doing it for love.
Mhm. Well, I'm wondering if there's anything we haven't touched on that you feel excited to talk about.
Tell you a little about disabled resilience permaculture.
Yeah, I totally want to hear
Yeah,
about that.
that sounds great.
Disabled resilience permaculture is a form of permaculture that my spouse Ming and I have been talking about for a long time. I made a zine a couple years ago called Permaculture for a Pair, which is about disabled permaculture. And I feel that people didn't care very much. A lot of people think disability is a scary, yucky thing over there that they want nothing to do with until they have no choice but to face it. And I we decided to try throwing in the word disabled resilience permaculture to make it a little bit more snazzy. And I people will like it more then. But resilience is at the center of disabled resilience permaculture, literally and figuratively, as there are three main parts of disabled resilience permaculture as we see it. So the first would be disability justice, with the idea that all bodies are valid bodies and that people who are abled don't have more worth than people who are disabled. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is just the permaculture itself, mostly having to do with gardening and gardening in communities with justice. So that, permaculture being a design system, having to do with being very respectful of parent earth and trying to get a good amount of yield with a low amount of work, but not using the shortcuts that are so damaging of certain pesticides and fungicides and synthetic fertilizers, but doing it in ways that are actually building the health of the soil and caching water and getting really nice yields with less work. Because I think of permaculture's main symbol as being the farmer resting in a hammock while nature does what nature does best, and not having to rip everything out twice a year, but just letting things grow and grow and making these gorgeous food forests that are so appealing to me. And then the third part of disabled resilience permaculture would be liberation that's intersectional. So having the fat liberation, queer liberation, Black liberation, Indigenous liberation, autistic liberation, trans liberation, uh, hooked in part of it the whole way through. So if we can do these things together at the same time in community, then we can form communities that are much, much more resilient than, for example, what Ming and I saw in Ojai at that farm. Because I feel like that farm was trying to make a community of people that were all very similar in a way, mostly abled, thin, white people of a certain class background. And to have true diversity of all different kinds of people with different kinds of bodies and ethnicities and class backgrounds. To do that is going to work way better, and it's going to create a real strength, not a pretend strength of fake harmony of, oh, we're all matching, so we'll all get along, which doesn't even work anyway. So to be real is at the center of disabled resilience permaculture. Because if we can be real about the disabilities and clear about the disabilities, what our gifts are, what our needs are, then nothing, almost nothing is off the table as far as our relating goes and what we can do together. Because there's things to do on a farm and in a community. Not all of them require lifting the bale of hay or mucking the coop or doing work in the sun for 10 hours. There's so many things to do in community and on a farm. And if we set it up so that all bodies are valid bodies and that aging is not only inevitable but desirable, and if we have the justice and the respect and the truth telling in place from the beginning, then we don't need to try to tack it on at the end when so and so falls or has their stroke, or when so and so is pregnant, or when so and so's baby is little and sick. If we have the resilience in from the beginning with the honesty about what we can and can't do and what we need and don't need, I think that will work a lot better, much better than pretending that we're as able as we can pretend as long as we can in order to get the benefits that abled people get in our culture.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful vision.
Yeah, I'm remembering what you said in the very beginning about having that little part of you, that little mouse sounding voice that knew you were okay. I'm wondering if you've explored that little part, if you know more about what it's about, and do you still have that little voice part, and what do you think of it now looking back?
I love imagining that little voice. Who was that? Was it the voice of God? Was it my guardian angel trying to keep me alive? Was it my ancestors who some squeaky some for a moment saying, "You're okay, we believe in you"? Was it Mother Earth, Parent Earth themselves that to me? Was it the water? Was it the land? Was it the light? I don't know what it was speaking that to me, but I feel like that truth is no longer hidden and is no longer the under voice or the subtext of my life. It's the over voice now and the one of the main messages of my life. But that's such a good question. What was that voice? I'll ask before I go to sleep tonight and see if I get any new ideas. But probably it was just the truth. I think it was just the truth the whole time. And it was covered up by the layers of expectation and adults wanting me to be easy when I was never easy, or wanting me to stop crying because they couldn't, couldn't handle their own feelings, let alone mine. So I learned all these ways that I was too much, but this little part of me knew that I wasn't. I was actually appropriate. So then I get to be an adult now, and I get to find out for myself what's appropriate, and it's much different from what I was taught as a child.
Beautiful. Well, we're about out of time. Do you want to share with the listeners how they can get in touch with you, how they can read your blog, how they can get a hold of your zines, how they can contact you?
Sure. I have a website. It's called Listening to the Noise Until It Makes Sense.com. I have another website. It's called ILikeYourStems.com, which is about autistic liberation. I have an Instagram. My Instagram is X Trike Sluts X. You can see there pictures of me on my trike, and exploring the intersection of disability and sexuality. You can find me on Facebook also. I have a Listening to the Noise Until It Makes Sense Facebook. You could also email me. My email is robotmad, one word, @gmail.com. I would love to trade zines with you or talk more about these ideas. And I feel very grateful for the opportunity to be heard. Thank you so much, Will and Jax.
So glad that you could come on and that you were patient with us during this turbulent year when we both had to keep rescheduling this interview.
Yeah.
It's a joy to speak with you, and it's so wonderful, and I am deeply grateful for what you've done for radical mental health and public health and great people such as myself and anarchists and people looking for something that actually works for our well-being. I'm so glad you've been there for so long.
Oh, thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. My heart feels very nourished by this conversation. Thank you
Me
for
too.
everything.
Me too.
Yeah. And Jax, thank you so much for co-hosting the show
Yeah,
today.
thanks for
Yeah.
having me on. I'm glad it worked out. I hope we can keep doing it in the future.
Let's do it. You've been listening to Madness Radio. This is an interview with Laura Marie River Victor Peace Nopales. Laura Marie is a queer traveler, maker of zines, radical mental healther, fat liberation, queer liberation, and autistic liberation-er, and the creator of Disabled Resilience Permaculture. That's all the time we have on Madness Radio. Thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to Madness Radio, Voices and Visions from Outside Mental Health. Madness Radio host is Will Hall, producer is Nina Packabush. Madness Radio is an affiliate of McNamara Radio, broadcasting on KBOO in Oregon, sponsored by Portland Hearing Voices and the Icarus Project, and syndicated on the Pacifica Network. Madness Radio is online at kboo.fm/madnessradio and at madnamerica.com.